Who owns the South China Sea? Will the competing claims in the world's busiest maritime corridor be the spark of a third world war? Is the Philippines ready to take sides in a great power competition or confrontation? This is the Naked Politics Podcast. Who owns the sea is a legitimate question. The sea have no apparent surface, just a flat, vast, briny expanse which makes it hard to divide. We can say all of us owns the sea and yet none of us do. The sea had long been a subject to the freedom of the seas doctrine, a principle put forth in the 17th century, essentially limiting national rights and jurisdiction over the oceans to a narrow seabelt surrounding a nation's coastline. The rest of the seas were declared free for all and belonged to none. But this is changing because technology advances and greedy national interests expand. And this is why we have decided to tackle the sensitive issue of sea grabbing in the South China Sea. This is Jan Argy podcasting from Los Angeles, and Jeff podcasting from Dublin, and Emil podcasting from Manila. Gerald Magno is also joining us tonight. He finished his Master's on International Studies from UP and is teaching political science in PUP. Later in the podcast, we will be joined by the Senior Vice Chair of the House Committee on National Defense and Security. All right, let's start. Technically, can anybody or can a nation claim a part of the sea or a whole of the sea?
To answer that, kailangan natin pag-usapan yung isang treaty na tinatawag na United Nations Convention on Laws on the Sea. Ito ay ginawa noong 1982 na mga bansa sa buong mundo, na kung saan ang Pilipinas isa sa mga nag-ratify at isa sa mga unang nagsulat at nag-advocate ng treaty na to. So under the United Nations Convention on Laws on the Sea, may tinatawag tayong internal waters. Internal waters, ito yung mga karagatan, anyong tubig na nasa loob ng isang bansa. For instance, the Cebu Strait, Bohol Strait, yung mga dagat sa loob ng archipelago natin, tinatawag siyang internal waters. At sinasabi rin sa 1987 Constitution na internal waters, these are the seas forming the archipelago or within the archipelago.
Emil, I know you will be discussing the 12 nautical miles and then the EEC. So in short, for example, Palawan and then, for example, Negros, that's more than 200 nautical miles, di ba? But that's within the archipelago of the Philippines. So that's part of the internal waters. That's what you're saying.
Yes,
okay.
That is part of the internal waters of the Philippines in pursuant to the 1987 Constitution, Article 1, a national territory. After ng internal waters, may tinatawag tayo territorial waters or territorial sea. Ito yung parte ng dagat na magsisimula sa shore at from the shore, ang layo niya ay 12 nautical miles. So from the shore of Palawan up to 12 nautical miles, ito yung tinatawag na territorial water. Sa territorial water, lahat ng batas ng bansa, batas ng Pilipinas, enforceable doon. And it's actually part of the national territory ng bansa na yon. After ng territorial waters natin, meron tayong tinatawag na exclusive economic zone. From the tip of the territorial waters, magbibilang ng up to 200 nautical miles at ito yung tinatawag nating exclusive economic zone na kung saan may sovereign rights sa isang bansa dito sa area ng karagatan na to. Ano ang sovereign rights? Ang sovereign rights under UNCLOS, ito yung sinasabi nila na kung saan, although hindi siya pagmamay-ari ng bansa na yon, yung 200 nautical miles na yun, still may karapatan ang bansa na yon to exploit all the natural resources.
Yung 12 nautical miles, titulado sa Pilipinas, yung 200 nautical miles, ito yung parang you have the right to exploit the natural resources. Pero, other countries basta dire-diretsong dumaan dyan, hindi kailangan magpaalam and they're not encroaching upon the territory of the Philippines.
Although sa usapin ng, for instance, West Philippine Sea, pinag-usapan natin dito yung exclusive economic zone actually. Kasi for instance, some parts of the Reed Bank are actually within the exclusive economic zone ng Pilipinas at under UNCLOS, sinasabi sa UNCLOS na pwedeng i-exploit ng Pilipinas yung mga oil doon sa party na yun ng Reed Bank.
Yung Scarborough Shoal ba, it's not within the 12 nautical miles?
It's also part of the EEZ of the Philippines.
Some part of the ocean, with nation could lay claim on it, pero hindi lahat. Itong conflict sa South China Sea, people are saying na ito yung spark plug to a third world war. Not necessarily between the claimants, but competing powers, di ba? So, bakit? Ano ba? Could you let us know what this nine dash line is and bakit the United States and even some European unions or the world are saying na hindi katanggap-tanggap tong ginawa ng China?
Based on historical and legal document na pagbabasehan natin yung 9 dash line, it actually started at I think 1947 when China is still under the Kuomintang Party, the Republic of China, led by time by Chiang Kai-shek. Doon unang lumabas yung 9 dash line claim ni China, saying na yung buong South China Sea, actually yung 9 dash line lang na yun is about the islands in the South China Sea. Wala pa silang binabanggit na waters. Pero naging international lang yung 9 dash line nung 2009. Nag-file jointly ang Vietnam and Malaysia tungkol sa kanilang continental shelf na claim. Kasi nagko-compete din yung continental shelf ni Vietnam and Malaysia. So nag-file sila sa UNCLOS para linawin yung boundary between the two countries. They jointly filed it and biglang nagprotesta ngayon si China. Sabi nila hindi yung pwedeng pag-usapan yung boundary on that part of the sea because it is ours. At doon nila nilabas yung 9 dash line. Noong 2009 lang actually nilalaman ng international community yung 9 dash line claim ng China. Pero it goes back 1947 pa under the Republic of Taiwan. And binana lang yon ng Communist Party of China ngayon based on Beijing. At nung nilabas ng China yon, nagulat lahat because China has been saying, kasi before that wala talagang matibay na legal basis si China to claim South China Sea. Kahit lahat ng Spratly Islands, walang mariganaw na basis. Luminaw lang siya nung nilabas nila yung 9 dash line and used it by claiming their historical rights sa area. And sabi ngayon ni China, since we own the South China Sea, Vietnam and Malaysia cannot claim the continental shelf under it, and dahil sa kanila din yun. So since 2009, doon na biglang naging tensionado yung sitwasyon between claimant countries. Although dati may tension pa, lalo lang luminaw. Kasi nga, biglang nagsalita na si China that all features in the South China Sea are ours. Parang kinlaim nila as their own lake yung South China Sea.
You're saying it's a historical claim in 1947. But what happened in 1947 that they claim these islands? Kasi dati ang sinasabi lang, ang naririnig lang natin, the name of the sea is South China Sea. That's why they're claiming the rights to the sea. It's a Chinese lake. Other than that, what happened in 1947 that they claimed the whole of South China Sea?
That time, Japan lost to the Western powers after World War II. So nung natalo na yung Japan, sila kasi nakakasakop ng karamihan sa Southeast Asia that time. They claim, for example, Vietnam, also Philippines. And after World War II, Japan has to renounce all their claim in the area through the San Francisco Treaty. Doon nirenounce nila lahat ng claim, kasama na yung Pilipinas, kasama na yung mga iba't ibang islands sa South China. Hindi nila sinama yung Spratly. So naiwan yung Spratly left hanging. Hindi nila binigay sa kahit na kaninong bansa. Kaya until now, yun pa rin yung problema natin. Walang binigay yung Japan kung sino dapat yung may control sa Spratly Island. And doon na nagsimula, until now, everybody's claiming it. Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei.
Maritime rights over the South China Sea on the basis of this map. This chain of islands comprising of the 9, 10, 11 dash line, but pinapasok nito halimbawa yung Scarborough Shoal na kiniklaim natin na atin, ng Pilipinas na atin. Huwag na mo natin i-discuss yung claims ng Vietnam or ng other countries. Let's focus on the claims pa na ito ng 9 dash line, di ba? Which actually is an 11 dash line nung una.
Before, no original.
Before. Tinanggal lang nila yung nasa sa Gulf of Tonkin in deference to North Vietnam. Claim ng China is they have the historical maritime rights over the South China Sea on the basis of this map. This chain of islands comprising of the 9, 10, 11 dash line, But pinapasok nito halimbawa yung Scarborough Shoal na kiniklaim natin na atin, ng Pilipinas na atin. Huwag na muna natin i-discuss yung claims ng Vietnam or ng other countries. Let's focus on the claims of the Philippines. And then, part of the Spratly Islands. Huwag na rin muna natin i-discuss that it was discovered by a Filipino. Ito bang sinasabi ng China na may historical rights sila? Do we have a counter-argument to that we also have historical rights on these islands?
Recently, Justice Carpio, he's roaming around the country and around the world, no? Debunking yung claim ng China that they have historical claims over doon sa, especially sa Scarborough Shoal. Recently lumabas yung map, what they call the Murillo-Velarde map. It's a map from 1734 ng isang businessman from the UK. And sa map na to ng Pilipinas, no, I think this is one of the oldest and the rarest map daw. And the world has like less than 20 copies of it. And recently, napunta sa kamay ng mga Pilipino yung Murillo-Velarde map. At sa Murillo-Velarde map na yon, nakalagay doon yung Scarborough Shoal. And ang pangalan niya doon ay Panakot Island. The Scarborough Shoal is the Panakot Island. So, the Scarborough Shoal is called Panakot Island in the Murillo-Velarde map. So, and that's 1734, year 1734. Kung historical claim ang premise ng China, and the historical claim nag-start lang noong 1947. During the Spanish occupation, malinaw sa mapa na yon, tayo na yung may historical claim. So that debunks entirely the claim, the historical claim of China. Because we have a 1734 map, they have a 1947 9-9 or 11-9. Recently, si Philippine historian Ambet Ocampo, sabi niya na gusto niyang baguhin yung pangalan ng map. Gusto niyang gawing Velarde Bagay map. Because though most of the map is drawn by Velarde, so isang Pilipino, Nicolas de la Cruz Bagay ang nag-print at nag-engrave ng map na yon. At pinirmahan din daw niya yung map na yon as Indio-Pacifico, something ganon. Bigyan daw ng credit yung Pilipino na yon. So doon pa lang napakalaki nung laban natin pagka historical claims ang pag-uusapan. A 1734 map versus the 1947 map of China.
But that map, I don't know, maybe Emil could say this, but in 1734, wala pang Pilipinas eh. We were still a territory of Spain. Can that be a counter-argument of China, Emil, that walang sovereign Philippines at that time in 1734 when the map was made?
Exactly, that is correct, sir. In fact, ang counter-argument dito ng China is that during the Treaty of Paris, yung Bajo de Masinloc, Panakota Island, or yung Scarborough Shoal is not included in the territory ceded by Spain to the United States. And yung pinaka-basis kasi ng territory natin is really the Treaty of Paris nung first part ng 20th century. Although kasi ang maganda dito dun sa map, sa bagay map is that klaro kasi doon yung Bajo de yung Scarborough Shoal. Nandun kasi talaga siya at parte talaga siya ng Pilipinas. It's just that hindi lang siya na-include sa mapa ng Pilipinas na nakalagay sa Treaty of Paris. Kasi kung na-include talaga siya sa Treaty of Paris, that is really a strong legal basis of our claim dun sa Scarborough Shoal.
If you look at the map, kasama pati ang Guam which is a US territory right now. So technically, if we were looking at historical rights, the Philippines has historical rights to Guam as well, but that's a different story. Now, let's talk about this. Anong meron? Anong meron sa South China Sea? All of a sudden, China is claiming all of the sea. Kasi, kagaya ng sinasabi ni Gerald kanina, only in 1992, if I remember it correctly, nung binanggit mo kanina, that they publicized this 9-dash line. And then, well, of course, ito yung post-Cold War na eh. May base militar ang Russia sa Vietnam, may base militar ang Amerika sa Pilipinas, kaya hindi pa sila makagiri sa atin noon, sa Vietnam at sa Pilipinas. But when the bases are gone, the US bases and the Russian bases in Vietnam are gone, that's when they started to become more aggressive in the South China Sea. Pero isa-isahin natin. Give me one reason, Je, why China would want to claim the whole of the South China Sea?
Reasons economically, because there have been studies na sinasabing South China Sea is very rich in oil and natural gas reserves. May mga studies na sinasabi there are millions of...
Could you give a number para mas klaro sa atin? Ano to? Gaano karami itong pinag-uusapan nating barrels of oil and natural gas?
The number can compete actually with Middle East oil. I think millions para under the South China Sea. Though wala pa kasi talagang seismic study na ginawa because of the competing claims. Hindi sila magkasundo to survey the area. But according to studies before, nung hindi pa ganun katensyonado, there is around hundreds of thousands of oil reserve in that area. And once na makuha yun ni China, they can supply oil China for the next 22 years. So ma-assure yung supply nila, hindi nila kailangan umasa for example sa Middle East. Hindi nila kailangan umasa for example kay Russia or kay United States to supply them oil. Because if China will be successful in claiming the whole of South China Sea, ma-assure na yung oil reserve nila for the next 22 years. And I think isa yan sa mga main reason ni China na on their claim na kaya ganyan sila katigas at ganyan sila lumalaban with regard to their claim in South China Sea.
Kagaya na nung sa introduction ko kanina, di ba? Previously, nobody claims the sea because we don't have the technology to garner whatever resources that is under the sea. Pero ngayon, madali na lang eh. Kagaya nga nung binanggit ni Gerald, ang estimate ng US is 110 billion barrels of oil. And that's about, approximately like that because China uses about 4.5 billion barrels of oil a year. So that's 22, maybe 25 years of consumption for China. And then iba pa yung natural gas. Ito yung estimate ng US, but the estimate of China I think is way much higher than the estimate of US ng natural gas and oil in the South China Sea.
So alam nila na they want to limit yung influence na siguro ng United States when it comes to Asia-Pacific region. And apart from economic, political, so kaya nililigawan din nila yung mga bansa around South China Sea. Siguro part of their plan to be yung plan nila to be superpower, yung rise nila to be a superpower. And kung ma-project nila sa international community na eto kami, parang it gives justice sa pagiging superpower status nila. No? So may pagka-geopolitics side and more aside from the economic side of it.
Yeah, but why is this why is this area so important in economically speaking, Jeff?
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken,
hindi sa resources
more than I think more than one-fourth ng shipping lines ng trade
36%.
36%, yeah. So more than 30% ng trade on the seas dumadaan ng South China Sea. So kaya malaking area ng flashpoint siya ng conflict kasi may connection sa economics and of course the geopolitics side ng...
So in short, kung pag-aari nila to, it becomes a tollway for China for all the shipping lanes. At yun nga, kung 1/3 of the world economy is depending on this shipping lane, I mean, how powerful can you be, hindi ba? Merong Belt Road Initiative ang China, hindi ba? Tapos meron silang yung Silk Road, yung traditional route from China to Europe. But there's also what we call the Maritime Silk Road o yung String of Pearls. But the String of Pearls, kasama tong from Shanghai, Hong Kong, Vietnam, and then Singapore, going to the Indian Ocean. How is this, yung claim ng China over the South China Sea, part of that initiative? And bakit importante in geopolitics yung String of Pearls and then yung bagong Silk Road?
Doon sa Maritime Belt Road, sa Maritime Silk Road, it is a plan of China to create a network of trade spots in different coastal areas, starting from the South China Sea going to the Indian Ocean up into the Africa or even the Arabian Peninsula. So ang balak dito ng China is that kung yung mga bansa sa network na to nag-participate sa initiative na to is that they will create some sort of a maritime trade spot kung saan maggagawa sila ng industrial economic zone sa tabi ng coastal area. Pwedeng gumawa din sila ng bases, military bases but on the guise of an economic zone area, parang katulad ng Shanghai.
Securing the route, di ba? Sasabihin nila dyan, they're putting up bases to secure the routes of the Maritime Silk Road. Aha.
Yeah. At nangyayari na to ngayon, especially dun sa around dun sa Middle East and the South and even in Africa kung saan yung China is nagbibigay ng loan concessions sa mga
Diba? Is this a way? Is what they're doing right now in claiming the South China Sea to blockade, well, whether if they declare war to reclaim Taiwan, to blockade the South China Sea? Ito ba yon? Ito ba yung game plan ng China?
There is a truth on that.
Belt and Road Initiative na yon, that Maritime Silk Road. So yes, at the face value, it has some economic purpose, pero it can be used militarily, especially kapag minanage na at naging may-ari na ng China yung mga coastal areas na to, it can easily be converted into a military bases. Now, although I would just like to add dun sa sinabi ni Kuya Jack kanina, na geopolitically speaking kasi, yung South China Sea is a weak spot ng China. Noong World War II, ang nangyari dyan is that madali silang natalo because of the South China Sea. Kasi doon nangyari yung blockade
Which brings me to the next question. And maybe Gerald or Emil, you could answer this. Hindi natin ito na-tackle, pero syempre the greatest obsession of China is to reunite Taiwan and the mainland China. They claim it's a province of China, hindi ba? Is this a way? Is what they're doing right now in claiming the South China Sea to blockade, well, whether if they declare war to reclaim Taiwan, to blockade the South China Sea? Ito ba yon? Ito ba yung game plan ng China?
There is a truth on that statement, Sir Jan, because you have to remember there is a US 7th fleet in Okinawa. And if China controls South China Sea, biglang malilimit yung power ng 7th fleet na yan. Hindi sila makakapasado ng South China Sea. And that 7th fleet is the one in charge on ensuring the freedom of navigation in South China Sea. Sila lagi yung lumilibot sa area na yan hanggang Strait of Malacca. So if China successfully controls the South China Sea, malilimit na yung power ni 7th Fleet, controlled by the United States, sa Taiwan pa lang. So hindi na sila makakapag-move forward, lalo na kung yung base ng China, yung military base ng China will be from Hainan Island. Na according to stories, though walang confirmation, meron silang mga missile bases nandun na sa Hainan Island.
Ang weird sa claim ng China is that yung 9-dash line na yon, ang claim ng China doon is that it's part of their territorial sea.
Yeah.
Diba? Under UNCLOS, ang territorial sea is 12 nautical miles lang. Pero ang sinasabi ng China, technically territorial sea, but party pa siya ng internal waters kasi ang claim dito ng China, yung mga chain of islands doon sa South China Sea, at yung chain of islands na yun, nakakapag-generate yun ng territorial sea nila at makapag-generate siya ng EEZ nila. Kung internal waters, itong buong South China Sea na to, hindi ka pwede mag-freedom of navigation doon.
Yeah.
Diba? Under international law. So kung maaprubahan,
Kung hindi lang yung freedom of navigation on the sea, pagka naging internal waters yan, it's also freedom of the navigation in the sky. Hindi ba? Yeah. Hindi na pwedeng lumipad ng kahit sino dyan without actual authorization of China because it becomes internal water.
So kapag internal waters na siya, tapos makapag-generate ng territorial sea, then EEZ, then bawal, especially sa internal waters, bawal na mag-freedom of navigation doon. And that is actually the stake of United States in this issue.
Yeah.
Their power over freedom of navigation sa buong South China Sea.
Yeah, they have a lot of interest in Southeast Asia. Hindi lang, well, of course, Taiwan and then Japan. Do you think there's a basis for that na ito nga part of the strategy to contain Taiwan?
Partly yes, no. Yung Taiwan Strait lang 'di ba? Problema na ng Taiwan 'yon. So if makontrol ng China yung buong South China Sea, and that means control na rin nila tong Taiwan Strait, at it will be easier for them to take military actions against Taiwan if needed, or if gustuhin man nila in the future to take over China by force. I mean Taiwan by force. Diba?
Okay.
And that will limit the US to act on it in defense of Taiwan because they practically control the entire South China Sea.
May na-miss out pa ba tayo na reason why China, maybe fish, tama ba? So it's part of resources, but China I think is consuming about 1/10 of world's fisheries di ba? So, well, they're feeding 1.5 billion people, 1.4 billion people. So, talagang kailangan nila ng maraming isda. And South China Sea, I think 1/3 of the fishing industry lahat nandyan eh. Kaya yung kung bangga-banggay nila yung mga fisherman natin, ganun na lang, di ba? Dahil dyan, hindi papasukan nyo sa, limbawa, sa Baho de Masinloc. So, let's go dito sa arbitral ruling. Could you take us? So, alam natin, nangyari ito, pinasok ng China yung Baho de Masinloc, yung Scarborough Shoal, kagirian ang Coast Guard ng Pilipinas at ng China, nagkaroon ng standoff, and from there, umikot at nag-file tayo ng kaso. Bakit tayo nag-file ng kaso? And what was the basis of the case? Anong resulta nito?
According to dun sa, I think, 4,000 pages na sinayal ng Pilipinas sa PCA or the Permanent Court of Arbitration, kinwestiyon natin actually yung claim ng China. Isa sa pinaka-importanteng kinwestiyon ng Pilipinas is kung meron bang legal basis yung sinasabing historic rights ng China to the 9-dash line. Number 2 din na importanteng gusto natin i-qualify is yung status ng features ng mga islands sa South China Sea. Kasi for an island to generate a territorial water, to generate an EEZ, merong mga sinabi si UNCLOS na qualification. Na dapat, for example, yung isang island can support a life on its own. And dapat, you can habitate there kahit hindi ka nakikipag-trade to other countries. Kailangan meron siyang natural resources for example. Pero kung wala nun, hindi ka pwede actually mag-generate ng EEZ. Hindi, ang pwede lang ibigay sa'yo is yung 12 nautical miles sa territorial water. So isa din yun sa mga gustong ilinawin ng Pilipinas. And yung under din sa pinalang Pilipinas, gusto din nilang sabihin ng PCA that what China is doing by building military structures there, o ayaw nga nila tawagin military structures fishermen lang daw yung mga nandun and civilian in nature daw. Hinaharm ng China yung environment in the South China Sea, yung natural resources, yung mga corals, etc. So yun, I think yun yung tatlong pinaka-importanting question ng Pilipinas with regard to PCA.
Oh, but para lang malinaw din, anong legal stature ng ng Court of Arbitration? At ito yung dito tayo pumunta. Dito dumulog ang Pilipinas. Does it have a legal stature on international law?
Under UNCLOS, pag merong dispute yung mga member states, for example, na China and Pilipinas, merong 4 na dispute settlement mechanism under UNCLOS. I think Annex 7 or Annex 8. The first one is through the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea. The first one is through the International Court of Justice. The second one is through the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea. Pero dun sa first two na yon, kailangan mag-agree din yung kalaban mong bansa.
Which China did not.
Which China did not. Kasi una pa lang sinabi lang ng China, we will not participate in that case. Una pa lang sinabi na ng China malinaw, kahit nung unang nag-file ng Pilipinas. So pag hindi applicable yung unang dalawang yun, papasok tayo sa third one, which is the establishment of an independent tribunal, arbitration tribunal, na i-create under the Permanent Court of Arbitration. So, for example, 5 judges yun. Pipili ng isa si Pilipinas, pipili ng isa si China, then the rest will be chosen by the International Tribunal and the President of ITLO, the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea. Pero since hindi pumili si China, hindi nga siya nag-participate, ang pumili ng last member is yung ITLOS pa rin, yung nag-head. So that's why doon tayo nag-fall sa PCA or the Permanent Court of Arbitration because China is not willing to participate in the legal proceeding.
Emil, what was the decision on that ruling? Of course, alam na natin yung ending. Pero what was the basis of that decision? Could you take us there?
All right. Under the PCA's decision, number 1 is that there is no legal rights. There is no legal basis for a historical claim over the 9-dash line because historical claim is not one of the modes of acquiring territory. That is a basic in international law. Then secondly, on the characteristic or nature of the Scarborough Shoal, the PCA agreed on the
And the
contention
other
of
island.
the Philippines that is not an island. It is just a rock, di ba? Since
Okay.
it's not an island, it's just an rock, therefore it has no territorial waters and it has no EEC, 200 nautical miles EEC. Then thirdly is that the PCA actually found out that China violated some international laws on environment, international environmental laws, when they aggravated the situation, when they built structures within the nine dash line that resulted to environmental damages. Now, I would like to focus on the issue of Scarborough Shoal kasi may fascinating na decision din dyan yung PCA. Sinasabi dyan is that although it is a rock, still yung buong area na yon ng Scarborough Shoal is a traditional fishing ground. Not only by China, but all of the coastal waters like Vietnam, China, and the Philippines. So, sinasabi dito ng PCA na parang may shared ownership. Hindi naman shared ownership, but they can mutually exploit that area of the Scarborough Shoal. And I think that is a revolutionary decision coming from the PCA kasi it is basically saying that this particular part of the sea is commonly shared by all of the coastal areas or the coastal states, the South China Sea. Kasi ito is part of Taiwan, di ba? Malapit siya sa Taiwan. The Scarborough Shoal, malapit sa Zambales. So kapag merong dalawang military bases doon, parang sa pinto yun.
Reason why China is actually building artificial islands on the West Philippine Sea, on Spratlys and here.
I think that's one of the reasons. Pero malinaw doon sa decision ng PCA na hindi counted pag hindi natural yung isang area o yung isang island. Kasi kung
So even if you
natural,
build the island, kahit naging kasing pa to ng Palawan, it will never be considered an island. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Kasi dapat natural siya. It can naturally host people and who can live on its own. Pero kung kumuha ka na ng mga structures sa mainland at dinala mo ron, it defeats the purpose ng pagiging natural ng isang island. Kasi gagawa ka na ng desalination process para magkaroon ng water, which defeats the purpose according to PCA, yung UNCLOS. And kailangan, malinaw daw yung UNCLOS na nandun, kailangan natural habitat. Para ma-consider yung isang area na island.
Although, sir,
Okay,
I just want to add something on Scarborough Shoal kasi napaka-crucial yan, geopolitically speaking, sa China. Just because, like ito, Scarborough Shoal, ito yung kapag gumawa ng base or artificial base ang China dito sa Scarborough Shoal, that can be significant military assets or military base ng China sa buong South China Sea, like ito So basically, from Scarborough Shoal, kayang-kaya ng magpaputok ng ballistic missiles sa Pilipinas, 'di ba? And aside from that, yung Scarborough Shoal and ito they will guard the entry to the middle of the inside the South China Sea. Kasi ito is part of Taiwan, di ba? Malapit siya sa Taiwan. Scarborough Shoal, malapit sa Zambales. So kapag merong dalawang military bases doon, parang sa pinto yun papasok sa South China Sea. So ayun talaga yung target ng China na makuha.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Although I just want to add these conspiracy theories kasi meron ding certain islands na inaayan China sa taas ng Batanes, sa taas ng Luzon, na kung saan actually right now, according to some sources within the Philippine military, is that occupied na at pagmamayari na ng certain Chinese personalities. Na kung saan yung areas na yun in the Batanes group of islands, it could be, is it the Puga Island? That is
I haven't heard about
within the Navy, within the military security establishment of Pilipinas, they are already anxious about that. About yung presence ng mga Chinese doon sa taas ng Luzon, sa Batanes Group of Islands.
Binanggit ko din to because, for example, the Arctic Sea, di ba? Nalulusaw na siya. Nalulusaw na yung Arctic Sea. And obviously, nag-aagawan dito yung mga Arctic countries, Canada, US, Russia, Sweden, because there's a lot of oil reserves in that area. And then all of a sudden, China is saying that we're also interested in that part of the world because we're a near Arctic country. Malapit daw sila sa Arctic. So if they can do that, if you look at the globe, and I hope our listeners and viewers would look at the globe, kung nasaan yung Arctic Ocean, ang lawak ng Russia bago nila malampasan yun, at yung Benham Rice, then that's very much possible na sinasabi nga ni Jet that they're surveying, that they're naming parts of the Benham Rice na itong part na to ay eventually would be claimed by China. I hope not, but
ako na,
yeah.
Well, ako naman,
Go ahead,
sir, I don't want to be, for me, that is somehow a conspiracy theory kasi based on international law, they have no legal basis whatsoever to claim Benham Rice because Benham Rice is actually an extended continental shelf of the Philippines. It has already been vested to the Philippines as part of its extended continental shelf. So ano tong extended continental shelf? Ito yung sinasabi na parte ng kalupaan na nasa ilalim ng dagat, 'di ba? Kasi dun sa ilalim ng dagat may mountainous areas 'yan, 'di ba? So ang sinasabi ng extended continental shelf is that yung mountainous areas na yun nasa ilalim ng dagat, connected pa siya dun sa main island ng Luzon.
Correct.
That's why we claim it as part of our extended continental shelf. Ayun yung basis ng claim natin dun sa Benham Rice.
Hindi, ang problema natin sa enforcement on claims, wala naman nag-enforce kundi yung bansa rin eh. Russia annexed Crimea and nobody blinked. Kung ito pa kayang parte ng tubig na wala namang tao, di ba? But I'm just saying, tama ka doon, you're totally right.
To butt in, Emil, no?
Yeah.
It might be a conspiracy theory. It might be considered like that. But why are they naming it? And why are they surveying it? Why? Kasi strategically, okay siya for China. Why? Because they have underwater military assets. And kapag na-survey nila yung mga areas na yan, and that will make maybe the 7th Fleet of the US vulnerable sa Japan and yung Navy bases sa Hawaii. So kapag na-survey ito ng completely ng China, it will be easier for them to navigate it. Especially kung meron silang mga submarines or whatever underwater military assets, diba?
Okay, Magno?
Also, we have to remember that China is so keen in developing its navy. They want to kalabanan yung blue water capability actually in the United States in this part of the world. At kung naging successful yung China to become a blue water navy, sobrang dali lang sa kanila marating yung Benham Rice. And also, number one, Philippines has no capability to survey that area right now. Wala tayong ganong kalakas sa capability. All China needs is a friendly government to them. So kung friendly yung government natin sa China, kanino pa ba titingin sila to survey that area? Remember yung ginawa ni GMA dati, the Joint Marine Seismic Undertaking. Kung saan pinayagan nila yung China to survey the area in the Recto Bank together with Vietnam noong 2005, I think. So ang nag-survey talaga doon is China with the approval of the Philippines and Vietnam through their own national companies. Sila, so parang mga private companies sila usap, yung mga state-owned companies. So nag-survey ngayon si China. Kaya yung sinurvey nila yung area, hindi nila binigay sa atin yung resulta ng survey. And by that time, biglang kinwestiyon na ni Harry Roque, for example, yung JMSU, yung constitutionality nung nasabing agreement sa Supreme Court. Pero nung question ni Harry Roque yun, tapos na actually yung survey ng China ng 2008. And until now, Supreme Court has no ruling. So hindi malabo mangyari na mangyari din to sa Benham Rice. Kung siyempre hahayaan ng Pilipinas, kahit tayo pa yung may-ari.
So let's go to
last point on that, the official explanation of China on that is that it's really purely academic. Kasi to be fair naman sa China, it is the leading oceanographic research. Hindi lang nagde-research talaga siya sa iba't ibang parte ng oceans, hindi lang sa Benham Rice. Pero ayun nga yung problem sa China. Yung military and academic aspect nila, blurry, di ba? At entangled sila, intertwined sila. So, pwede ma-convert yung academic, research, activities nila into military. At ayun nga yung problem ng China. Kasi hindi sila nagbibigay ng confidence sa mga bansa, sa buong mundo, kung saan good faith yung pag-research na ginagawa nila, even yung naming.
Yes,
So,
na
ayun
merong
yung
mga
position nila,
military
na
jets
parang,
sa mga artificial
good faith
islands.
research,
Diba? So,
academic
medyo
research,
nakakatakot.
optional
We don't want to take them, no? Based din sa history ng China.
honesty,
Hindi
diba?
sinabi nila nung nag-claim
Kasi
sila
may
ng
nila sila. For example, yung mga islands,
hindi daw nila i-militarize. But now there's evidence mga fishing fleet nila, 'di ba? So it's actually a militia, no? Mga sila, mga paramilitary fishermen, no? Para hindi siya maging military conflict, parang in the guise of fishermen, kaya nila nakokontrol yung maraming part ng South China Sea. Na inaalis nila yung control ng mga traditional fishermen from across ng mga coastal states around those areas na yon. So,
Okay.
I don't want to take them as in good faith na ginagawa nila yung pag-survey ng Benham Rice.
Okay. So, hindi tayo matatapos ito sa Chinese intention. It's a new podcast pa kung gusto natin. But, at mas hindi tayo matatapos sa next topic because the Duterte strategy. So, nangyari lumabas yung decision like a few days after Duterte assumed the presidency, hindi ba? What was the strategy? Ito, lumabas yung decision. Did we use it?
The strategy is to set it aside because Duterte wants to be friendly with China. Biglang ganun eh. Di ba? Pero during the election, if you can remember, mag-jet ski nga siya dapat towards the Spratly Islands. Yun yung pangako niya, di ba? And sabi niya pa, malinaw, sinabi niya during the meeting they want, atin ang West Philippine Sea. Atin yung mga islands na dyan. Pero, ano yung nagbago? Bakit biglang sinet aside natin? I think, malaki yung naging epekto actually sa mga nakausap kong other scholars, lalo na sa mga politiko, malaki yung naging epekto ni GMA pagdating sa stand ni Duterte sa China. Remember, the GMA administration is the parang golden age yun ng Philippine-China relation. And the GMA, na halimbawa, lagi naman tatanong si Duterte sa mga former presidents except Pinoy. Lagi siyang magtatanong, for example, kay Fidel Ramos at kay GMA. Pati yung mga bata ni Cory, si Dominguez, si Lorenzana. And I think, nagtanong si Duterte about China kay GMA, I think doon na-click, doon biglang nagbago yung strategy ng Duterte. Para gayahin yung naging strategy doon ni GMA na friendly yung China, though ang laki kasi din ng difference eh. That, remember, ang panahon ni GMA, hindi naman siya yung laging nagsasabi na we are pro-China, unlike Duterte ngayon. Parang GMA did it diplomatically, tahimik. Nalaman na lang natin merong NBN ZTE deal. Nalaman na lang natin merong North Rail project, all funded by China, ODA.
I think kung may isang bansa na pinakamaraming beses pinuntahan ni Duterte, it's China. I think he went to China for like 6 times already. And I don't think any president did that.
Yeah.
Kung tama yung recollection, maybe I'm wrong, pero yun yung tingin ko doon. Pero Jeff, sinabi ni Magno, kampanya, he was anti-China, and then all of a sudden, may ship, maybe it's the GMA factor. But what was it? Anong gustong balik? Ito ba yung kagaya ng mga NBN-CTE deals or North Rail project? What, Jeff?
Well, base sa mga sinasabi ng mga mga analysts na possible na reason first is economics. Because there's an ambition, a very ambitious build projects. And they want to look for funding as much as possible. And outside doon sa mga traditional na pinagkukuhanan natin ng funding for these kinds of projects. And China, based on that premise, nag-promise sila na to fund with multi-billion dollars through loans from China to the Philippines. And siguro yun yung unang reason ni Duterte, why he chose to be friendlier than Pinoy administration to China. But then, sana nung nakikita tayo
Is it also a realization na ito talaga ang boss ngayon in this part of the world, and there is a waning US power, and that's why may panibagong amo dito sa parte ng mundo na ito. Posible din ba yun?
Possible, no? Siguro nakita nila na mas malapit tayo sa China compared sa US, and kapag nagkaroon ng major shake-up ng world geopolitics structure, diba? And mas magbe-benefit tayo kay China. And malaking bahagi si China ng natin, ng trade natin, no? Malaking part siya ng trade relationship ng Pilipinas sa economy din. And apart doon, siguro politics din, no? May mga lumabas na
So,
pictures.
conspiracy theory ulit.
Ulit. So may mga lumalabas na pictures na bumisita si Duterte at si Senator Bongo sa China prior to the 2016 election. So, alam naman natin na yung mga superpowers, may mga kanya-kanya ring bata yan, no? So, hindi lang siya pronounced, pero baka possible that could happen, no? Hindi naman to exclusive kay Duterte before, 'di ba? No? So, US, alam natin na meron yang pinupush na candidates din, 'di ba? Nakita natin 'yan noong panahon ni Marcos, no? Na US is obviously vying for Marcos presidency, 'di ba? So,
Okay.
Possible na gano'n.
May mga nagsasabi din that actually, dahil hindi dumating yung investment or hindi na ibigay yung mga ipinangako, there's a sudden pivot. Una, yun nga, nangyari na inabrogate yung BFA, then all of a sudden, ibinalik. Whether ang dahilan, China or the Philippine military, we don't know. And then, ito nga, si Secretary Locsin, on the anniversary of the arbitral tribunal, sinasabi nila that the ruling is non-negotiable. May pivot nga ba? And then kung may pivot nga, how do we enforce the arbitral ruling? Kaya ba nating i-enforce to? Kung sinasabi ni Secretary Locsin na non-negotiable to?
It's not a pivot, but a pivot towards the United States, di ba? Kasi sinasabi is that there was a pivot to China, then right now, para bumabalik tayo sa United States. Ako, hindi ko tinitignan that way. Kasi ang basa ko dito is that nakipaglaro talaga si President Duterte sa United States at sa China. Sinayawan niya yung rivalry ng China and United States. In fact, sa first 4 years ni President Duterte, mukhang lumalapit siya, tumaya siya sa China. Tumataya siya sa China. Pero since patapos na yung term niya, mukhang nakikita na ni President Duterte na mukhang natatalo siya dun sa gamble niya dun sa China, sa China gambit niya. That's why bumabalik siya sa United States. Although sinasabi ko dito na sinasayawan ni President Duterte ang United States and China because we cannot really say that President Duterte is really pro-China during the first 4 years precisely because he didn't abrogate the BFA. Although the rhetoric was heavily pro-China, but the nitty-gritty or the actual fact is that there is still a BFA, there is still EDCA, and there is the Mutual Defense Treaty. Ayun lang naman yung measure eh. Kung talagang pro-China ka na or anti-US ka na, tanggalin mo yung BFA, tanggalin mo yung EDCA, tanggalin mo yung Mutual Defense Treaty. Pero hindi ganun ginawa ni President Duterte. Although his rhetorics are heavily pro-China, pero he maintained this international treaties we have with the United States. So ang basa natin dito is that sinayawan niya talaga yung China. It's just that towards the end of his term, mukhang natatalo siya. Mukhang hindi siya nananalo dun sa sugal. Since 2 years na lang siya, mukhang babalik na siya sa United States. That's why hindi niya talaga sinuspend yung BFA for instance. Although may 2 years pa siya, pero ano na lang magagawa niya sa 2 years? Kasi nakita natin dito dun sa 4 years na yon, ano yung binigay sa kanya ng China? Mukhang wala naman, di ba? Although may binigay somehow, pero it's still napaka-minuscule. Although I can say na, okay, China did not militarize Scarborough. Pero actually, ayun lang yung claim ni President Duterte na prevent niya yung militarization ng Scarborough. Pero sapat ba yun? Given his pro-China stance, although personally, may 2 years pa naman. So I will still wait for the next 2 years to really have a definitive answer or judgment on his foreign policy towards China. On the second question of how to enforce the arbitral ruling, kasi ito yung basic and mainstream critique dun sa arbitral ruling. Kasi sinasabi nila is that is a piece of garbage kasi hindi naman yan ma-enforce because we don't have a world government. But for me, actually, there are many legal remedies or legal ways to enforce that. For instance, we have Chinese properties in the Philippines. We can attach that. We can get it as a compensation doon sa occupation nila sa South China Sea. We can even enforce the arbitral ruling in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, wherein there are Chinese assets. And yung mga courts na to, they can easily attach or confiscate these Chinese assets to compensate us dun sa ginagawa ng China. And of course, multilateralism. Perhaps Gerald can talk with that, di ba? Multilateralism with the ASEAN countries?
I think yung gamble with Duterte with China, hindi pa sapat yung panahon para tingnan natin na natalo nga ba siya o hindi. Malay natin, biglang may gawin na naman si Duterte. Yun ang mahirap kay President Duterte. Masyado siyang, ang hirap niyang basahin sa mga ginagawa niya. Kasi biglang binawi yung BFA. Lahat tayo nagulat. And after that statement from Doctrine, biglang nag-issue yung United States to the State Department na sinusuportahan nila lahat ng claimant states sa Southeast Asia against China. If you read that news, na for the first time, since time immemorial, nagkaroon ng stance sa United States na sinusuportahan nito yung Pilipinas, yung Vietnam, yung Malaysia against China's claim in the South China Sea. Kasi this is the first time. Remember, kahit nung panahon ni George W. Bush, lagi silang safe sa mga sagot nila Na, remember, there's one time na tinanong din, will you defend the Philippines if China attacks the Spratly Islands owned by the Philippines? Ang sagot nila is parang hindi kasama yung Spratly Islands sa teritorya ng Pilipinas dahil wala tayong effective jurisdiction ngayon. Hindi siya natin totally controlled. So ngayon, naglabas yung United States ng definitive statement that they are supporting other claimant states except China. And I think that is Trump's way to tease China. Kasi ang laki ng conflict nila ngayon. Pwede rin nating tingnan yun saan magiging aksyon ni Duterte in the next 2 years ng kaniyang administration. Depende rin kung sino mananalo sa November. Kasi mamaya biglang bawiin naman biglang bawiin naman United States yung stand niya sa South China Sea. So, masyado pang fluid yung situation to answer na kung wasted ba yung naging gamble ni Duterte with China.
Okay, thank you very much with that. So at this point, we will be joined by the Senior Vice Chair of the National Defense Committee Chairperson and 5-term representative of the City of Muntinlupa, Congressman Ruffy Biazon. Okay. Thank you for joining us, Congressman Biazon. Congressman, many are predicting that the Third World War will start in the South China Sea. If that happens, are we prepared for it? And if not, how do we avoid the war and resolve the territorial dispute peacefully?
All right. Well, as a country, of course, I don't think that we're prepared to fight a Third World War on our own. Our armed forces is not that equipped especially to go against a world superpower like China. But there are other means available to us to try to prevent a war, because I think that should be the ultimate goal that we should have in mind. Try to prevent a war, and of course the first step there would be through diplomacy. We should exhaust all available means for us to resolve this peacefully, and if possible, together with the neighboring countries that we have in ASEAN, in the region. And if it needs to involve other countries as well, even up to the United Nations, we should be prepared to do that. And then the second thing we should be relying on would be our traditional and reliable allies, those who have been together with us through different challenges. And I would be speaking of principally, of course, the United States and our ASEAN neighbors, and even all the way to the UN. And judging by the decision made by UNCLOS, we do have our recognized legitimate rights over certain portions of the South China Sea, or the West Philippine Sea as we call it, which is the possible flashpoint of a Third World War, considering what is going on now in that area. Relying on our allies militarily, in case that diplomatic solutions are not successful, I think is the appropriate way to go, because it can't be denied that there is an existing conflict between the Philippines and China, particularly on the claims in the West Philippine Sea. So the flashpoint being the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea, it would mean that the conflict is stemming from the claims in that area, because as we all know, China is practically claiming everything all the way up to Malaysia. And the tension between the United States and China are basically about those claims the international rights of passage in the international waters there, and the recognized claims of countries. And as I said, we are armed with that decision of the tribunal granting us those rights. So we should be siding where our rights would be asserted and protected. But nobody wants a third world war, and that's why we should really be exhausting all efforts in trying to get a diplomatic and peaceful resolution to this.
Okay, thank you very much, Congressman Biazon. We hope you could join us again in the Naked Politics Podcast. So this is the Naked Politics Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and comment on our YouTube channel. Search Naked Politics Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. Thank you and good night.